He's just
This meeting is being recorded.
Just so you all know, this meeting is being recorded.
Yep.
Yeah, he's just daring Disney to sue him. So,
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I'm sure
yeah.
And when you think about it, where we are today, think about next year and the year after and the year after that. That this isn't some Civil War song. These are it's now starting to to erode into contemporary music as we know it.
If you find some music that is very old though, and someone has edited it, and you want to play that version of it, then you got to start all over again, right?
Yeah. It's well, it's for creative people. It's always been the multiple challenges of this business, and it only gets more complicated as time goes on.
One song that became available this year is "I Scream, You Scream, We All Scream for Ice Cream." Rah rah rah.
Be a chart topper, I'm sure. Once again,
I was just pitched out.
Okay, so let's get started. I think we've got the trickle has sort of slowed here, so I think we've got most of the people that are going to be here. So I'd like to thank you all for showing up and attending our I guess this is what we're calling our freelancer forums. So just to kind of give a background on this was something that we've been trying to get around to as officers and staff for a couple of years now. We had a lot of conversations about the need to do things like this during the pandemic, and I'm just happy that we are doing them on a regular basis now. Our plan is to do these every month. I think a handful of you may have been to our last one that we did last month with Alistair Elliott on his Keeping the Band Together presentation, and we certainly have many more planned. But today, I'd like to thank Dan Beck and Samantha Ramos from the MPTF office, who are here to just kind of share some insights and stories and best practices and any tips that we may be able to glean from them and ask them a few questions. First, I'd like to just I'd like to acknowledge that we are on land that was undoubtedly occupied by members of the First Nations from across the country, from wherever we are. This is technically in a space that we call the Independent Gigging Musicians meetings. And one thing that we've done that has been actually kind of fun is, if you want in the chat, just drop a link from part of the country that you are that has, or the tribal, the land that your area was called before it's called what it's called now. So there's a couple of greetings from various, lands of various tribal affiliations. So it's just kind of fun to just see where folks are coming from, and just to see some of the names and tribal names that may be there. So if you feel comfortable doing that, we encourage you to just drop a line in the chat. Just a greeting and a salutation is all we're asking for there, if you feel comfortable. I would also like to say a quick thank you before we get started. And I'd like to thank Tammy Norieko for, if you don't know Tammy, she is the Secretary Treasurer for the Orange County Local. And she's probably one of the people who are responsible for helping a lot of the officers, at least in the Western Conference that are there now, learn how to do stuff. She's been instrumental for me, and I see Lori nodding her head. I know there's a great many people who have gotten a lot of information from her, and I'd like to thank her for what she has provided us today, which is a really, really awesome resource, which is all of the documents that may be pertinent to our conversation today in one place. So I've put a link to a Google Drive in the chat, and I'll put it a couple of times because people are still kind of joining in here. But feel free to access that. You should be able to download any of the forms that you may not have available. If anything gets referenced, that way it'll be easier for us all to pull it up. If we need to get at it again, I can just keep copy and pasting the link as we go. But Tammy, is there anything you'd like to point out or mention about those resources that you put together? Thank you so much for taking the trouble to do that. So
Yeah, sure, of course. However, I can be of help. One of the things that should be in that drive is a spreadsheet with a template of a breakdown of some costs for the groups that we provide to the trust fund. And I put in there's a key on or a legend, whatever you want to call it, at the bottom of the spreadsheet where you can put in your scale wages. So you'll see a sample of some scale wages that are from local 7. So if you're going to fill that in from your local, you want to key in, replace that with your own scale wages, and it'll populate through the spreadsheet. So those are just samples, and you can mess around with them as you will. So that'll be the only note, I think.
thanks, Tammy.
Yeah.
Well, if you have anything, that you think would be relevant as we go, feel free to interject. You are the information that you always provide is always so helpful and impactful. So anything that you have, I'm sure everybody here will be grateful for. I also like to introduce Wages Argott, if you don't already know him. But Wages is administering the freelance co-funding fund right now. And we've had a lot of conversations, and he's going to be here to just kind of also interject if he has anything useful to say. But the idea is to kind of start to think about how some of these resources could be put together, could be used in tandem, and we'll just see where this conversation goes, because I am here to learn just as much as host a Zoom meeting, because I think one thing we can all acknowledge is that there's just a lot of stuff to know about the MPTF fund and how people from across 2 countries utilize the fund. And I think this is just the idea that we had here is let's just have a forum where we can kind of hear some of those stories, get our own brains churning a little bit, hear from the office itself, and be able to, maybe get some of the information a little more directly and not do that game of telephone that happens sometimes when we're trying to just figure out and remember what was said. So, Dan, Samantha, I guess, is there anything you'd like to say to start out here? And then we can go into the questions that we sent. Does that sound like a plan?
Great. No, just very happy to have Samantha on with me. Our grant management team are really the ones who handle the day-to-day. I fundamentally try to stay out of the grant process unless they need me, and if there's something complicated or something we haven't seen before, and believe me, they've seen everything. And between Vidri and Samantha and now Natty working with them on our live stream events, but I do try to stay out of it, and basically so that I don't get worked and they don't get worked around. If it's pure to their process of reviewing a grant proposal, and they're doing it when we're clearing probably 10 or 12 events a day, 24/7, 365. This last year we funded over 4,000 events, and we're a staff of 5. So it's, we have a finance guy who's getting the checks out and also dealing with all of our other financial issues, including, getting our money in from the signatories and which I'm also involved with. And there's me and the 3 grant people. So it's a very lean staff. The process, one of the things that I hope we can help you understand is demystifying it, that it's pretty simple when it really works. These proposals come in, the grant team reviews it, and we try to turn these things around as quickly and as positively as possible. So essentially that's it. And I guess the question to you, Nate, is how you want to handle, you guys put together a great list of questions, and I don't know if you want to present them to me or you want me to just.
How about I'll read the questions so that the group can hear them. Samantha, do you have anything you want to add to that?
That sounds good on our
No,
end.
not at this time.
Okay, all right. So we have about 10 questions that we've assembled from our IGM meetings. Thanks to those that attended those and helped come up with these questions. This is always as I'm sure Dan and Samantha know, this is always a very robust discussion, and I'm looking forward to this. So the first question that we came up with was about some potential unique partnerships, and what would some examples of some unique presenters or co-funding partners or venues, and how has the MPTF been paired to produce concerts or opportunities with those venues?
Okay. Fundamentally, I would say 90% plus of the events themselves really come from the locals, and that we're solicited on ideas and plans that the locals are creating. We're involved with about 2/3 of the union locals. I guess there's roughly about 171 union locals. This year, we're working with about 124. There's still like 47 locals not very active. Most of them tend to be very small, as the membership of the 124 locals that we're working with constitute about 92% of the total membership of the union. So that those 47, 48 locals not involved with us are really only about 8% of our annual grant budget. And of that, let's see, there was one other point that I had about that number. And that roughly equates to about $250,000 out of our $3.7 million budget that is kind of in limbo, and what we do with that money is Vidri and Samantha have tremendous awareness of how money has flowed over the course of time. And so what we do is, as we evaluate who's not going to use their money or not going to use their allocation, that we then extend it to other locals beyond their allocation, so that we try to get as much of our funding out there as possible. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do, and that is to get our money out there. As far as unique situations, maybe that other 10%, it's been referred to historically as the trustees fund, and where we have some wherewithal to bring in other partners. We work with the Save the Music Foundation, where they're doing music education programs. They'll come to us. Their thing is putting instruments in school programs. Okay. And so they will come to us on occasion and say, hey, right now we're working on trying to do something in Mississippi, and in which they've got a really stronghold down there where they're all the schools. And so we're saying, okay, you're putting the instruments in, let us bring some a live music event to highlight it, to emphasize it, to kind of drive the community to understand, that there are these resources and efforts to enhance the culture and the educational opportunities in the community. We work at the French Quarter Festival. And we work with the Broadway League. We do a big show in the middle of Times Square once a year. We also work with them on Juneteenth, which we do a Times Square thing. And we have to be careful when we work with a third party. We have to make sure that number one, that that they can live up to our responsibilities to make sure the musicians are paid, and also that it isn't so complicated and time consuming that it just weighs our staff down. It's like when we're trying to get 10, 12 approved events happening every day, that if something comes in and bogs us down on organizations that's hard to work with, or that there's a problem that they're not living up to, so we have to be extremely careful. But there's a couple of things that I've been trying to do. We've been in discussions with SoFi Stadium, and which is a state-of-the-art venue in Inglewood, California. And it's the community itself is about 50% African American, about 50% Hispanic, and kind of a real hardworking community. But when you think that SoFi Stadium sells out 6 Taylor Swift dates, 420,000 tickets in a week, and it's selling out the Super Bowl at that venue, that that it isn't the community that's buying those tickets. The community is dealing with all the traffic that's coming through, and yet the community is oftentimes working for the stadium. They have something like 2,000 food service people who are all union. And so I've approached them to say, hey, what if we did a little series for the community out on the grounds of SoFi Stadium to give back to the community, to show the community that this big successful stadium, this amazing venue, cares about the community. And of course, they have a community relations department, and we're talking to them now about doing that. And what I'm hopeful we can create is a kind of a case study that I could take to the Polestar convention, which is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but it's, that is the money touring business, and I want to take, I want to try to position a panel discussion there of admission free, and why should there be an admission free panel at, the mega bucks operation of the tour business. And I feel that there is a place for that for us. There's a place for those kind of events that the people like Ticketmaster and the big touring companies, AEG and they need to give back. They need to, they need some good PR. And I also think that's the future of the business. It's, if we look at where the recording industry is now and how indie the music business has become, that, our source of signatory funding is going to hit a wall. And, and when is that wall 3 or 4 years down the road? Is it 10 years down the road? There needs to be some approaches to find other partners that can be a part of what the AFM and the Music Performance Trust Fund work together on. So
that's a great answer. Samantha, do you have anything you want to add? Otherwise, I would probably keep moving here in the interest of time. But do you have anything? Please, if you do.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. So Sam's going to come in here on a few questions later.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys did a good job dividing these up. So I just want to make sure that okay. Well, let's how about we move on to the second question then. We had a question about special programming. How much of the program needs to be on the theme or requirements of an application? For example, if there was a theme such as featuring composers from a certain demographic, how much of that show would need to be on topic?
The number one, we have to leave that to the applicant, and it's as it's presented to us. If we feel subjectively that it isn't quite there, that we would have that discussion and say, well, let's say Jazz Appreciation Month. Well, how much, who gauges what jazz is, and so I mean, different people have different perspectives on that, and so we have to trust our applicants to bring us the right choices there. We're not here to judge music. I think in other situations, and I'll give you an example that has come back to our grant team, and it's Black Appreciation Month. People have come back and said, well, we have X amount of African American performers who are members of the union. What's a balance there? And fundamentally, we've come back to them and said, look, you have to evaluate what impact you're making about the issue of Black music. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that plays is African American. It means that there is a community coming together for that purpose. The same with Women's History Month. And so we have to leave that your way. We may make some judgments along the way to say, gee, that I mean, doing the 1910 Fruit Gum Company, hour of music really isn't jazz, I don't think, and so, but we're not gonna be, we're not gonna be hard edged about that. Hey, we're dealing with professional musicians. They, you guys know what it is, so it's, and I have to tell you, the responses we get are 99% on the mark, so.
That's great to hear. That is great to hear. That's a great answer. Thank you, Dan. Okay. Moving on here. Are there additional resources available for larger shows? Do you have any advice for a local that may be looking to expand their MPTF presence to larger venues?
Yes,
I think you kind of got into that a little bit with the SoFi a little bit. That had my mind spinning for sure about our local, about Climate Pledge Arena. They're really trying to position themselves as an arts venue. So I think we already have kind of gotten into that a little bit. So please.
I think a couple of elements to this, Nate. One, just say Jazz Appreciation Month, that we kind of have a general sense of what the size of a band should be. Now, if somebody comes to us with a larger idea, we're going to listen to that. We're going, can we start blanket approving a whole bunch of those? We can't. So we got to be careful about it, but we'll definitely consider what's presented to us. If somebody comes to us with a great idea that's a little larger, well, we're gonna consider it. I think, by the way, there too is that in coming up with co-sponsorship out there. It isn't just about finding one partner. It is, hey, is it a venue here? Is it a media partner over here? The newspaper will, it's, I think, you can't look at it in absolutes. You have to look at it, oh, hey, who could contribute to this and who could do it easily? A venue says, oh yeah, Tuesday night, we got nobody there, and the newspaper says, yeah, we could run that. It doesn't cost us anything, or a website or, a media website. So there are partners out there that you don't actually have to ask them for a lot, and I think it's trying to maybe think a little bit like them. What could they give you that wouldn't hurt, and I think a lot of times, once you get a partner and okay, you got a venue, and then it's easier then to go to the next partner and say, well, hey, we're looking at getting MPTF money in here, and we got a venue, and we got a media partner. We just need another $1,500 or whatever to make this thing work. Well, all of a sudden, people feel like, yeah, well, I'm not the first one they're asking. There's something. There's some momentum going on. So I think there's that psychology that can help, bring in partners.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm already getting some ideas from that. So, okay, the next question, and wages, you may have some input on this, so please feel free to, chime in if you think of something, but the next one is about resources. There's always a conversation around staffing that may be required for producing shows and live stream events. Is there any conversation to expand funding for support staff?
Yeah. Well, number one, we will always consider it, and we saw this particularly during COVID doing live streams where there was tech support needed, and we would have people, local people come to us and say, well, gee, the venue they got 3 tech people, and all of a sudden they want 3 times the money that we're going to pay the band, and so we're there, but one of the things that we try to do is to protect the percentage of our money that's actually going in the pockets of musicians, so, but the fact is, we understand there are pressures. There's pressures for tech. There's pressures for, other elements of support. So the best thing is to just come to us with, what is it, and then, and we'll try to deal with it. I don't like to go above 15% production. It's, and I know that's lean, but once again, it's trying to protect the funds as much as possible for the purpose of going into the musicians' pockets, so I think that's fundamentally it. And we know that's a pressure point for a lot of times, trying to get things done on a local level. So
wages?
Yeah, so this is a good time for me to drop in and just briefly mention the freelance co-funding program for those of you who have not heard about it before, or any kind of introduction to the program. I see a lot of faces of folks who have utilized it here. I dropped some documents in the chat. If that's not the best way to disseminate, let me know. I'll email it to whomever might need it. It's 3 pages. 2 pages are kind of the longer guidelines for the program. The first page is just kind of a nice, colorful, quick bullet point representation of what it is. But for a time now, the Federation has set aside $100,000 out of the general fund to support initiatives for freelance musicians. It doesn't just benefit freelance musicians, but that's really the focus as kind of an organizing tool, as sort of a transformational tool. though a lot of folks have used it to preserve some programs within their local to keep things from going away. It can definitely be used for retention or recruitment, but specifically as it sort of applies here, since you brought up this element of additional expenses that might be incurred if you're running some kind of event, especially if you're scaling up and doing something larger. The freelance co-funding has stepped in to help a lot of folks from small, kind of just streamed performances to, larger venues, outdoor and indoor venues, where you do need to kind of bulk up your staffing, and you may have some needs, not just for personnel, but maybe your equipment needs, maybe your publicity and signage needs. All of these things, anything except actually paying the musicians, can be covered under the freelance co-funding. And just one quick thing to note that's very important, it is co-funding. So that means that you as the local would be responsible for part of that money, however much your expenses are, though you can receive up to $5,000 for a single event. And really, in the spirit of the program, you could do that twice in a calendar year. It sort of resets after each 6 months. So, if you had something you wanted to do in the first part of the year, maybe something different in the second part, I encourage you to reapply. Just a quick history on that program. We've been doing very well the last couple of years to get up to just 50% of total usage. I don't even know if I should be proud of that or not, but for the previous 10 years before I took over the freelance department, we were about 25,000. That money doesn't roll over. It doesn't come back to us. It needs to be used. So if you think you have an idea, if you have some expenses, if you want to do an MPTF event, but you feel like you need additional personnel, you need equipment, you can't advertise, maybe you want to do a streaming event, but you don't feel like you have the right equipment for that, have that conversation with me, call me up, we'll talk about it. I'm sure there's a way that can work. And just to give you an idea, if you are a smaller local under 250 members, you qualify for the highest level of co-funding, which is 65% from the federation. You put up 35%. So if you maximize the full 5,000, that means your total event's around $8,000. So you're only coming up with between 2,500 and 3,000 of that money, and 5,000 would come from the federation. So it's a nice, helpful amount of money. And maybe it's not just a one-time consumable thing, but you want to buy some equipment so you can start to do some of these things on your own, or make improvements to your existing facility so that you can host some of these things again in-house. I know a lot of folks are fortunate enough to have their own space, but again, making this stuff available for your members to use outside of the MPTF is also a great use of this. So, if you do wind up purchasing some AV equipment and that sort of thing, there's a lot of different things to think about. I'm happy to have these discussions with any of you who have more questions about this. I know we're limited for time tonight, so I don't want to open it up too wide unless we have some time at the end, but there's no dumb questions. There's no dumb ideas. Shoot for the moon with this stuff. I can't urge you enough to call me and talk about this so we can get that money in your hands, because it really needs to be out there. And a lot of folks have done some really great things, and I can give you some examples when we talk about it too. But I do just want to say on the subject of, some of these extra expenses, there is something within the federation that can assist you with that. So please, my contact information is in the document too, so you can find me that way.
Thanks, Wages. Amy, did you have something that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, I just had a question for Dan. You mentioned that you would consider, I guess, staff, a cost for staff to, run the production or something. You said like up to 15%. And I wondered, in the application, when you fill out the application for the job, there is a line item there for program manager. And would that be where the cost would go, under program manager? I've never used that before. I wasn't sure what that was, and I wondered if you could explain if that's what you're talking about. Or
I prefer that to Sam, because just how the grant team would like to receive those kind of questions or proposals. So
okay.
Sam.
Sure.
Program manager is I know Local 47 uses that title, and they have a specific scale for that. So if you were to use a 15%, I would advise you to put that like in your breakdown sheet, and maybe like in the cartage box or the payroll fee. It just got to fit in somewhere, so depending on what you have going on already, and we fill in the application as we go along, then we could fit it in somewhere so that anyone can identify it easily.
Okay, so it could be for perhaps someone that's
Yeah.
administering the
Yeah.
program, administering the night, making sure everyone is.
Yeah, since we don't always cover that, there's not a box for it, because then everybody would ask for it, you know.
Yeah.
And this is a case by case basis, so we'll just fit it in somewhere if you're approved for it at the time, you know, when it comes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Interesting. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Sam. Let's see here. Okay, so question. There was a festival in Las Vegas. We can't remember the name. Is there any plans for similar events in the future? And conversely, how could a local hold a similar event in their region?
Okay. I believe, Nate, the festival or program you're referring to was something that was spearheaded by Alfonso Pollard.
That's the one.
Yeah. Okay. And Alfonso was working with the Las Vegas local, and they had a 2-day plan, and it was and involving significantly involving the Black community in Las Vegas, and kind of a jobs fair, you know, multiple panels and that sort of thing, and plus a live performance where they were going to have something like 8 or 9 kind of new acts in Las Vegas, you know, really locally generated performers to play. And when they brought it to us, it was kind of this whole mixture of all those things. And basically we said, look, we can't cover panels, and we can't, you know, we can't cover jobs fairs and things like that. Can you so they had a poster planned with all the sponsors. They had several sponsors involved, including the city municipal government of Las Vegas. They were doing a great job of pulling people together. We said, look, we can't be a part of that. Is there a way to separate the performance part of it from all the other elements? And so they did this double-sided poster in which we were the sponsors on one side of it, and all the other sponsors were on the other side. And, you know, so creatively we worked out a way that our funding could be used for that. I really feel bad about that situation for this reason. I attended it, and I thought they did a fabulous job of organizing the events. I mean, everything was clockwork. It worked, you know, and the performers that they had were exceptional. You know, it was a wonderful day of musical experience, and also a lot of really positive energy among these young performers about the union. And so it was really, really, really great. When it came, they had a very soft attendance, which, and I have to tell you that you don't have to hype us on the number. We want everybody to work hard to get an audience out, but we don't judge our grants based on, you know, an imaginary number of people that are going to attend. And that event was modestly attended. There were maybe 80, 90, you know, stretching it, maybe 100 people attended. But again, it was the event itself was so well done. I thought the union did a great job, and whoever, all their partners and everybody. And what the sad part was that it didn't continue. And, you know, my feeling was we did this one, the first one, and that's where you learn, and that's where it's all the hard work, and then you discover all these things about how you could do it better, and then the next year you take an incremental growth and it suddenly becomes something, and unfortunately there wasn't the energy to do it the second year, and that was kind of heartbreaking, because I thought they really were on the right path, so, and I don't know whether there were different people involved, and the people who were there the first year weren't there the second year, who knows, as you guys know, everything changes with live music. So it was just one of those things, but I thought they did a marvelous job, and we're always open to hear about those things. That's kind of where I do get involved, where if somebody has a crazy idea, that they talk to me, and my background is marketing, well, how can we create this in a way that would fit what Sam and Vidri do, that it fits the policies and procedures that they monitor and they try to make happen. So that's where I do get involved on the front end from time to time. So we're always open to that, and it's like, and also that's where maybe it's like, gee, have you thought of speaking to this organization or that potential partner, so the whole thing is, looking for ways to get something done, so we're all up for that. And the other thing is, something you should realize is that, and maybe many of you do because of events you've worked on in the past, is that there's a lot of funding that we do that are annual events. And so kind of once you get it in there, when the proposal comes into Sam and Vidri, it's like, oh yeah, last year, boom, here's how it worked. And those things have a tendency to fly through the system really, really fast, So, by the way, I should say this too, for everybody out there, it's really none of our business as far as how we submit our allocations out to the locals, and how that's worked out is really not our business. It is, it's the business of the local, it's the business of the membership. And I just really strongly encourage just a lot of communication. It's I know for some officers there's a lot of pressure from city government or the Chamber of Commerce or whoever else, or the partners sometimes on projects. And so when they're looking at their allocation, they're mapping it out for the year and saying, oh, we did this last year, and we got X amount from that organization. We got to keep them happy. So there's a lot of pressure from time to time on the union officers to do things. But I think also it's if there's ideas from membership that come in that aren't just, can we get some money? It's with an idea. It's like, hey, we're thinking of this. How would this work? Could this fit into into the locals allocation, and I think it's that communication. I know some locals have an events committee that discusses these things, and what should we be doing from 4th of July? What should, and how to use our funds, so, but again, we try to stay out of all of that. That's not what we're, that's not what we're there for, so.
Amy, do you have something you want to add here?
Yeah, I wanted to share an example of something that we helped get started. Years ago, there was it was called Downtown Brea, and it was like a merchants association of this little downtown shopping center that was like an outdoor shopping center. And they came to us to get some referrals, and we helped them get a whole music festival started during this the winter time. So every weekend they closed off the street. They put up a big outdoor stage and everything, and we got the bands together, did it all through the trust fund for the first couple of years, and then they got it going. They're like, all right, we know how to do this now. So then they didn't need the trust fund anymore, but they held this music thing every winter for years. So that's another thing that you can help municipalities or associations get started by using the trust fund. So they get it going with 50% of the cost, and then you teach them how to put on a festival and then they get to do it on their own. So it's another example of how to keep it going. But we had to keep talking to them and tell them, how to, like you said, communication is a key, of course.
Speaking of keeping it going, I'm going to move on to the next question here in the interest of time. So is there any work on payroll or a workers' comp policy? Would the MPTF fund be in favor of creating a funding pathway so work dues could be paid to the international, which could be then used for something like payroll? Dues could be partitioned between local and international. So I think that's more of a concept. Would you be in favor of? Is this, your thoughts?
I've spent a lot of time on this over the last few years. The whole payroll issue with the trust fund ended around 2010, and around that time there were about 18 employees of the trust fund, and when I got there in 2013, that had all been deconstructed, and because the trust fund just couldn't handle $2 million a year in overhead, which would be at this point probably $2.5 million, just maybe $3 million. So the whole pure idea of payroll really just isn't feasible. What I have tried to explore, particularly as we got onto streaming revenue, and our revenue, instead of crashing for 15 years, started coming back up. And so I started exploring first liability insurance that would cover the trust fund for event insurance. And I exhausted the insurance industry. I mean, we went to everybody. And in fact, Jay Blumenthal helped me explore it. Ken Shirk helped me explore it. We went to the unions, insurance people. We were all over the place. I actually finally found an insurance company that would cover us, and it was feasible. So then we started looking at okay, how would we handle the payroll? And I really did not want to Ray Hare and I had talked about it as far as potentially doing it through Music Pays. And I felt that a trust fund surge of events through Music Pays could be a disaster. It's just too much, too fast. And also, as we started looking at our own software and matching that up, that it was going to take still adding staff to do it. So we started looking on the outside. So, okay, how could we, use an outside payroll service, not have to connect with 50 states and all the provinces of Canada and all the various rules. And it still came back to matching up our system with the payroll service was going to take 3 or 4 more people. And when I started looking at what would we gain from this, it would be maybe to get 10 more locals involved, that it might impact $300,000 or $400,000 worth of grants, but would cost us $250,000 to do it. So it ultimately was like, scaling it up. Initially I thought, okay, our revenue is going up, and maybe we can scale up. But as I started evaluating where streaming is, and streaming right now is maturing, and the good thing about it is it's subscription based, so that it's not going to suddenly drop off dramatically like the physical music business. I worked at Epic Records. We would have hot years and it would be cold as ice. And it was just the flow of hit product, that would change the dynamic. So we're a little bit protected by that now, because, people subscribe just like they subscribe, to Netflix or, or cable or whatever. But streaming is maturing. And I could tell you this is that we've got about 75%. We get paid from the signatories, and primarily it's three. It's Warner Music, Universal Music Group, and Sony Music. That's essentially 90% of our money. We get paid from those labels in August for the first 6 months of the year, and in February for the second 6 months. So we're just getting the funds in now. We're flat to last year. We've been going up about 14, 15%, 16% a year for the last 4 or 5 years. And now we're flatlining. Now, my expectation is that that plateau is probably going to exist for 4, 5, 6 years. So it's not like, we're going to have less money. It's just, we're not going to continue to grow.
Yeah, I'm going to cut you off here because we still have a couple questions here. I think we're starting to get in the little weeds and a little far away from the yes or no question of, are you in favor of a funding pathway here? But I think we got our answer here. And you may hear more. That may be a conversation for a later day, as you say, streaming is maturing. So thank you for that. That was very insightful. Quickly moving on here, because I do want to respect people's time here. Is there a way a secondary form could be produced that has representative language that would be appropriate for communities with very few symphonic musicians?
Yeah, we discussed this, and we didn't really understand the question. A symphony proposal or a jazz trio proposal, it all fits into our form. We didn't really quite understand, the nuance of the question.
I think the origin of the question was just to maybe have some options for communities that might need a little more hand-holding in filling out some of the paperwork. So maybe it's not specifically about genres of music, but just kind of some of the things that you're asking for. And maybe that could be a way to move into another one of the questions that we had, not to skip the order here, but any plans and resources being developed to help co-sponsors understand their responsibilities. It is problematic as local officers are reinventing the wheel, quote unquote, every time they approach a co-sponsor. And I understand that's partially due to the case by case nature of what the fund is. but I kind of feel like those two questions may be connected as we were discussing what to ask you. Just in terms of there's a lot of musicians in some, especially for the smaller locals, or you get into some of the maybe purpler and redder states where certain language doesn't go as far as in other places. So I think there was some question if there could just be some variety of forms that we could have access to. I think
Yeah, I mean, we try to keep it lean and mean. I mean, once again, we're 5 people. You're 60,000 people. And we're processing over 4,000 events a year. And so trying to keep that process as, as fluid and easy to get through. And, I think, and I know there's people on the call here that will heartily agree, is that, Samantha and Vidri and as well as Natty, they're all there to help, to help get to solve those questions. Well, how do I do this? And and we know there's new people coming into this process all the time. It's when we didn't have money and we had about 90 locals involved. It's like there were a lot of locals out there that the word was MPTF doesn't have any money, so no sense even applying.
Maybe a way to answer this question would be, you don't have any care one way or the other what the locals to develop to communicate to their communities about the fund. You just need the fund filled out once we apply for it.
Well,
I think this is where the co-sponsor brochure comes in that Dan had sent you. So I mean, you're forgetting, like, well, maybe not forgetting, but like the first step is with the local and the co-sponsor. Because a lot of locals have their own rules, or I don't know how they want to spend their money. So I don't want a sponsor to come to me and I'd be like, oh yeah, they have XYZ. Meanwhile, you're holding a portion of that for something else. So that's why the sponsors need to communicate with the local first and kind of, I know some locals have their own contracts, their own language that they'd like to use. So I think the first step is the local and the sponsor. Our stuff is pretty much universal. When the allocations go out, we send out the guidelines and stuff, and you can use that, along with the co-sponsor brochure to have that conversation.
I think, Nate, I sent out the digital version of that brochure. We have printed copies that if a local needs 50 copies of it to go out and spread around the community, we're there to provide that stuff, which as a selling tool to bringing our resources into your communities, and so we're there for that. I'm there for, if somebody needs to talk to a city councilman, I'm there for it. If there's a co-sponsor that needs to hear from us to say, hey, look, we could be there for matching funds or whatever, whatever the purpose is. We've moved very, very dramatically from, it's just a few years ago that our quote matching funds were 30%. And even for, assisted living facilities, we were only providing 40%, and education events, we were only providing 50%, and now both the senior program and the, and the educational programs are 100%. And we've then tried to spike things with 100%. For Juneteenth.
Maybe this could be some language that could clarify the question a little bit. venues can sometimes be caught up in legal language in the terms and conditions form, and they sometimes aren't involved with payment. So would there be a way to perhaps have like a non-payment co-sponsor form so it doesn't appear that they would be liable for something they're not? I think that's to the point of the question there. When we have, to your point, the large variety in applications.
I would say this, Nate.
Okay, great.
We have money. We put money out there. It is your responsibility to find.
Not about the money. Is there money? It's as we're communicating the responsibility. It can be
I know the
confusing.
question. So I think no, it wasn't Tammy, it was Marjorie. She had an issue with the municipality, or if something doesn't apply to you, you don't want to sign the form, basically. So if you have a sponsor, or you have a payroll service, if you have a separate somebody who could be the employer of record to pay the musicians, it could be a band or your cousin who has a business and could provide the W-9, then you have the person who's getting the check sign the form, because that terms and condition is basically saying that you're responsible to pay the musicians, you're responsible to send a check to the pension office. It's all about the money on that form. So whoever's getting the check should really be the one signing that terms and conditions form. So if you,
I've used arts organizations that have a 501c3 that are happy to, facilitate as the fiduciary for things, and it's worked really well for me. Like the local aggregating arts organization for our area.
right.
It's worked out really well for us.
Yeah, we've done that too.
But we still would like, we don't want people to just go with the person that could cut the checks. We still would like for you to find a sponsor. And if you do, then we want that information. We don't want their federal tax ID number because they're not getting the check, but we want their information. And then you could put whoever's getting the check and is willing to be the employee record, they would be, you would indicate that information under the payroll service, because there's 2 sections, and provide the proper paperwork. So you can bypass, if you have issues with the terms.
When I've had to do that, it's like when I'm dealing with a college or some type of thing where it's going to turn into where 30 days or 60 days through them to get paid. So the arts organization facilitates it as a middle person and makes everything work better.
Yeah.
And faster.
Right. So we would still want the college's information, but the person who's going to get the check to sign the terms and conditions and receive the check and is responsible.
Exactly.
Right.
And
by the way, go ahead, Sam.
Oh no, I was just tying this into the green sheet question. We haven't used green sheets since I don't know when, but every local has an MPTF account, and we don't collect musicians' information. We don't know who's on the job. We don't have their social address. So there's really no need for us to create a form to hold all that information, if that makes sense. Every local has an MPTF account. So all your activity throughout the year is on there. So I'm not really sure where that question was going, but.
And by the way, one thing on our terms and conditions, some people see that as kind of draconian. That's like, oh, gee, I got to sign this thing. The purpose of that is to make sure the musicians are paid. We're just requiring somebody to say, I'm responsible and I'll make sure the musicians are paid, and so it's not anything any different than, the application of those kind of protections that the union would do. So, we're just hand in hand with that philosophy and that relationship and that requirement, And by the way, that terms and conditions agreement is one of the easiest ones I've seen on any kind of event.
What I will say in defense of my colleagues is it doesn't matter how simple a form is, the likelihood that some secretarial accountant misreads something and missigns something. We have, in our local, we have certainly seen that be just an obstacle, just pure carelessness as anything. So
And Nate, we go through that ourselves. We just had a situation with Local 77 in Philadelphia where we were doing a simple musician fest performance in a library, and they got the whole, city of Philadelphia law department involved, and so we can't sign this, and we need to change it this way and that way. It's like, come on, And what we did was, fortunately, Marjorie Goldberg and Sam, worked it out to find a side approach to getting it done, because the city of Philadelphia was, spending more money doing this than.
Sam, can I ask you really quickly, what did you do? That sounds like an interesting story, because I think that's representative of a lot of local officers' experience when they're trying to deal with a municipality. There's so much just civic red tape that it starts to really get hard to figure out the way to navigate.
Right.
Well,
One
Marjorie has the payroll service, Paycheck 77. So they're getting the check. So technically, they're responsible to pay the musicians and make the proper payments. So we want the city's information, but Paycheck could sign the terms and conditions because they're getting the check and they're responsible to make the payments. So they would sign.
That wouldn't necessarily be available if a local didn't have a payroll service.
But it could be available if you had somebody willing to be the employer of record. If you knew, somebody or a store or whoever is willing to take that responsibility, then you could have that done.
And Nate, one thing, it's like Ted was saying before, where he had some solutions for how they work. Some of the absolute best experience you're going to get is from other people at other locals. An example, Hamilton, Ontario, Larry Fuedo can tell you how they established a relationship with the city council there, that in fact, the city council, there were like 16, 18 members, and they actually came to a vote where I think 14 out of the 16 or 18 councilmen voted to make sure that any musician that worked for the city of Hamilton was paid a union scale, whether they were a union or not. And it really made a statement for what the union was doing for that city. But, I know those guys, they were going to the city saying, hey, you have an economic problem in this part of town. People don't want to walk around there. If we put some music in there, it'll change the environment. So our free performances, when I say ours, it's yours and ours.
Now we're actually talking about economic development and being a larger part of our local communities, which is such a nice topic to talk about once in a while here, because that's what we should all be doing. That was really a wonderful little segue. I think one of the things that a lot of us would like to see happen with the funds that we have are those kind of relationships being built. And it's really, really great to hear an example. Maybe that's something that we could kind of put into like a round 2 of this conversation, is just that specific story about what Hamilton did, because we always hear about it just in sort of a bullet point in a presentation. Hamilton did this. Well, if we had some step-by-steps on how Hamilton used the MPTF fund to show and build this relationship, I think that's a pathway that there are other cities that could walk down that path as well. But we need to hear how that went.
And you have people in the union who have just very unique skills. I know there's a couple of people out there as far as bringing in partners that they're just really skilled at it. Was it Dan in is it Kansas City or Lincoln, Sam?
Omaha.
Oh, in Omaha. Right. He's remarkable in bringing in partnerships, and so there's people out there that I think you could tap into that.
That'd be
You know,
great.
here we are sitting in New York City. You know, we don't know how to solve a problem in Omaha. You know, we don't know how to solve an issue in Seattle or Santa Ana. You know, it's like, but there are other markets that experiencing the same challenges and issues, and I really think there is a whole lot about that discussion being being increased out there about how do we get this done, how are you doing it, it's here's some ideas that we bring to the table kind of thing, so
That is a really, really great note to maybe wrap up the official part of this conversation here. I think I had said that we would go 90 minutes. That would leave us, if anybody wants to ask a question, Sam, Dan, Tammy, Wages, anybody, I mean, if please, I mean, I think that this was just a great conversation. I love that idea of, tapping back into our own colleagues as well and figuring out in Omaha, how did you solve some of these problems? Because if there's a shoe that fits in Omaha, it may fit someplace. It's very likely to fit other places. So that's exactly the kind of learning from each other that I knew we'd get to with a conversation like this. So does anybody, Tammy? Yeah, please. Do you have something you want to ask or add?
Yeah, real quick. Dan or Sam, do you guys have you pay ASCAP fees, right? So we can present music that is not necessarily original tunes because you pay ASCAP, right? Isn't that right?
We do not pay ASCAP or BMI or CSAC or SOCAN in Canada. These are free performances. They're non-commercial. There shouldn't be, and you guys may have a greater experience with that than us, but I think where it's a commercial performance, yes, then it's the ASCAP and BMI licensing, and that becomes an issue. We have dealt with it only on the live stream, and that's why.
Oh, that's where I heard that.
That's why we do not allow any recording, because once that live stream becomes a recorded track, then we have to deal with every publisher involved. So, which would be, just hundreds of clearance issues. We'd get about 5 live streams a year done. And
for the live streams, you have that covered.
Yeah, that's and the way we have it covered is that Facebook has a blanket license with all of the performing rights organizations. Okay. So as long as it's not recorded, we operate under those licenses. And
it's streamed on Facebook. Okay.
Are we going to be involved again in Make Music Day?
Yes, we will. Yes, and again, the way we approach that is Make Music Day comes to us and kind of targets certain areas of the country where they may need some supplemental help from professional musicians. And we say, okay, well, we'll put a little budget aside. You talk to the locals and see, see if you have a working plan with them, and then we'll supplement it, for the professional musicians, because so many of those performances are amateur performers. But what we see is a lot of times they look for mentors, or they look for leaders, professional musicians who could come in and provide the leadership to student musicians, etc.
Well, one of the things about it is it's supposed to be participatory. It's not just a performance. It's like a teaching event.
Yes, absolutely. And initially when it was proposed to us, it came to us that actually there were a number of locals that did not want to get involved at all, because they said it's amateurs, and that it's sitting down and talking to the Make Music Day people. It was like, no, we need professionals to lead, to really be the instructors, for that day.
James and then Lori.
What I'm finding is I can't give away the money. I can't get people. They don't want to do the work. Oh, you mean you're not just going to give me the concert and I can just go play? No, they have to go. We've tried all kinds of different things
Lori, who is
talk
they?
to people.
Who is they?
The musicians. Our musicians.
Ah, okay.
So
that's different than the sponsors.
Yeah, we just need, ways to encourage our musicians to want, rather than just to say, oh, just give me the gig, to actually go out and oh, it's too much work to go find a sponsor and, and a venue, and I just want to do the gig. How do you encourage people to?
Actually, if any of you want to respond to that as well, I think that's a question for the room.
I mean, I'd be happy to respond if you can hear me. This
Aaron,
is Aaron.
Good to see you, man.
Hey, yeah, definitely. This is Aaron in Atlanta, and I know we're encouraged, and we've definitely looked here in Atlanta for, community sponsors who can separately tie the room together, so to speak. But occasionally we'll have musicians with their own LLC, who can help to kind of lead and bridge the gap between whether it be a church that's got some trepidation or memory care facility. Also here in Atlanta, there's quite a few that, there's just too much red tape. So a soloist for Musician Fest might just have their own LLC to kind of help bridge that gap. But that's at least one way here in Atlanta. We've been able to get more funding to musicians. Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to touch upon the green sheets. that Samantha 30 years ago.
We've got folks with their hands up. I'm sorry, man.
Okay.
And James has been waiting here forever.
Oh, hands. I got to do a hand. All right.
Please do.
Thank you. It's good to see a lot of you, and nice to meet the rest of you. So I'm going to ask a question that I'm pretty sure I know the answer to, but I just I do want to make sure it's asked. As we try to I'm from Local 6, and I feel like a lot of our MPTF funding has been for classical concerts. And trying to go outside of our classical sphere and do jazz and any other type of music, it's sometimes hard to pay them as employees. And so a lot of times bands will sometimes play for free, or some people will pay for free because they are independent. But I've also had groups just be like, I can't do it because I don't want to get paid as employees. Is there any way that an independent contractor thing could be done, or in some way done? I'm not sure how that could happen, but I know it's a union contract, and so they should be employees. But it feels like there needs to be some wiggle room with certain bands. But I mean, it's your role, so I don't mean to push anything on you guys. So I'd appreciate your thoughts, I guess, on that. Yeah.
I don't mean to interject, but here again in Atlanta, we have a nonprofit called Jazz Matters, and they kind of act as the employer and find the venue that will help to connect the dots and also help host. But that is one other way. If you already have your own entity and likeness, and have it registered with the appropriate parties, if you have an EIN, then that is one other road. At least we've seen it in Atlanta.
That's fabulous. That's great that there's an organization like that.
Anybody else have any thoughts to that?
It's a little more complicated than that, though. I think that some people have it in their head that being paid as an employee will take money away from them.
The ethics you're right.
I'm sorry.
It's more of the ethical dilemma of being a non-employee. Well,
Okay, is that right, Tammy? I'm sorry if maybe I have something confused, but does MPTF not require W-2 employment?
They do not.
I'm not sure I
No.
understand the question, but
No, we just pay the sponsor. We are neutral with members versus non-members. You know, that's
Okay.
Your discretion who's playing and what you want to do there. We don't get involved in that.
Okay.
But yeah, they don't
That
have
might
to
be also a
W2.
California thing. Sorry,
Oh.
Samantha.
James, I think I follow your line of questioning, and that's certainly a discussion that does happen as you get in, especially as you get into some smaller local territory, because you just get musicians that are just not used to working as employees, and it does become an issue of, hey, I just want my money, just give it to me. And that is something that I think we should put into a round 2 conversation, where I think we're maybe doing a little more trying to find, as Dan said, like our colleague in Omaha, what are some of the things that they've done to solve some of those problems? Because I'm sure in a place like Omaha, they do get some of that conservatism that might not want to be a musician that works as an employee. I know the local in Tucson has a lot of that problem, actually, where the musicians just want to do that kind of rugged individual thing. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and maybe we could follow up a little bit after this and come up with some specific questions to ask and get around to that, because I think that is certainly a conversation that comes with this whole MBTF thing. So I'd like to go with Richard, Al, and then Edmund, and then I'm gonna guess that's probably gonna be enough of a meeting here for everybody. So let's have that be our home stretch here.
Hello, everybody. Hello from Milwaukee, Local 8. I've been at a lot of meetings with small locals, and I think the one paramount thing for the MPTF implementer in the local is that person needs to be paid. That person needs to be paid an hourly rate. Otherwise, you're just going to get burnout, because it's a long process. A lot of times it's not fun. So I've seen smaller locals, and Dan, thank you. It looks like the number is kind of small for the non-participatory locals, but there's, a lot of elderly people who are not really computer savvy, and there's a lot of opportunities that are being missed out there. Actually, MPTF has helped 3 orchestras in our local, orchestras that ran out of money. They couldn't do, one orchestra ran in Kenosha, Wisconsin, ran out of money for their children's series. We're going to help them out this coming year. There's another orchestra that is, really having a hard time. We're going to help them out next month. And so MPTF is great for that. But for me personally, I am the MPTF implementer. And whenever somebody asks for me for money, and I have to go out there, I go on the clock, and my executive board approves of that. Because the implementer can get burned out, and then it's harder for us or people to go out there and find co-sponsors and find fill out all the forms. It's a lot of work. It's time consuming, but it's good. It's good for our whole community, but you do need to pay the person. Thank you.
Something tells me that in an additional follow-up conversation, maybe we could pursue some kind of, like, I don't know, there's like some grants or something like that we could kind of start getting people to look up, think about that, some different funding, so that that person could be paid, Richard. That is, to your point, especially when there's a lot of communication that needs to happen, it can be pretty tough. So let's go with Al and then Edmund, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. I've been doing MPTF for about 30 years. And in the old days, there were these green sheets. They were carbon copy. You filled one out with a pen and sent one copy to the union, one copy to the trust fund, one copy, it was but at that time you were paying for pension payments. So I would add $20 to my pension. And one day I got a letter from the pension. You are now vested in the AFM pension. And I went, what does that mean? And I know just recently, in the last year or two, you started paying those pension payments again. And I think that's a good thing for everybody to know, since it hasn't been mentioned, that you can get a little contribution to your AFM pension by doing MPTF. And it adds up in the long run. You know, that's what I've got.
Yeah.
Edmund, you wanna?
We've never stopped paying pension. I mean, I don't.
It's been, yeah,
It's,
where
it's
applicable, where the local is.
yeah. Where if the local's pensionable, then we pay it.
Yep.
You know, I don't know why that all of a sudden, you know, our treasurer said, "Oh yeah, you can do pension payments now."
Yeah.
I've been doing them for a while without it, you know. So I think it had something to do because I was already collecting the pension. That may have had something to do with it.
Maybe.
Ed?
Yeah, just really quickly, about the independent contractor versus employer. Philosophically, in those types of situations, if there's a identifiable employer, we really should. But the problem is that musicians, for several generations now, have been used to being misclassified as independent contractors. If you're in a band that works all the time as that band, the band leader, according to California state law, they are an employer. Now, if it's once in a while and kind of a throw together thing, yeah, it is a truly an independent contract type band. But the reason why this has become so important is because during the pandemic, musicians who have been traditionally misclassified couldn't get unemployment. And that was huge. And fortunately for a lot of independent contracted musicians, we were able to help in getting the pandemic unemployment assistance passed. But if it wasn't for that, I know musicians who would have ended up being homeless. So, and also when you're an employee, you're not paying the bulk of the taxes. You're paying half the taxes for that work. So you're actually, you're not taking home as much, but you're actually getting a lot more benefit from it, including a pension contribution with MPTF. So it drives me a little insane when we have musicians going, look, you have a chance to have this benefit you not only now but later. Why not take advantage of it? Well, but the problem is that we have to actually educate the musicians that, they don't have to have, no social safety net. They can actually do this. So
I think that's probably a good place to end the meeting here. I'd like to say that conversation, Edmund is well aware of this. But that's the kind of conversation that we're trying to move forward with, conversations like the one that we're having today. Now that we all have sort of this foundation of an experience, I'm really looking forward to hosting a round 2 of this, where we can look out to our own colleagues and get our own best practices and start to put those together. I'm really encouraged to hear about some of these different examples. I wasn't aware of how instrumental the MPTF fund was with Hamilton, for example. As I said, that's something that we all hear as a bullet point in a presentation, but really don't understand the steps that it took to get from point A to point B to point C all the way to the end, because surely that wasn't a 2-step process. So
Right.
Hearing these steps, and that one of them was a well-produced MPTF series, really gives me something that I can think about and that we can examine with our colleagues here in some of our own meetings. So if you are not getting an invitation to our weekly Saturday meetings, we host them Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific. So that would be 2 p.m. Eastern. That seems to be the best time for everybody. I think that's before rehearsals for most people still. So that's kind of when we do them. That's where we came up with the work plan for this and the other workshops. If you have a topic that you would like to see us cover, we would like to cover it because we're just, you know, these are opportunities for us to learn from each other. I had a number of folks ask if it was appropriate to invite others to this. I think yes, we want this series to be something that officers can invite prospective members or board members or folks that may be looking to be a little more involved in what the AFM is. So if these conversations are ever useful, send them the YouTube link or let them know what the next panel discussion is going to be. I think the next one that I'm working on right now is we have some members in the Seattle local that do booking. So we're going to put on a little some best practices for musicians to find gigs. And by proxy, I'm sure that'll work great to find co-sponsors. So all this stuff can start to work together in a really, if there's a, you know, if we can do this right, then this will all be under the same tent like it was designed to be. And we can just keep helping and learning from each other. So I want to thank Samantha and Dan for your time in the evening. That was a really insightful conversation, and I know that there's going to be a lot of thought to your very thoughtful answers that you provided, and I think there's probably a lot of learning that we can do as a result of this now, and I know that's kind of where we all want to go. So I can't thank you enough for your time, and thanks to Wages and Tammy also. You're the best, Tammy. So thanks pal. All right, so and like I said, if you're not getting an invitation to something that you'd like to be invited to, I will follow up to everybody that registered for this with the link for the recording, and please feel free to correspond back and say, hey, do this or don't do that or something. I'll probably do it anyway. So just let me know.
All right. Nate,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having us. We appreciate it. We love to help wherever we can, you know. So
I think we all come away with something.
I have to say the last year and a half, 2 years coming out of COVID, the work that the locals have done, you know, to expand our growth as far as getting our funds out there has been just spectacular. I mean, you know, we've seen, you know, as much as there's a struggle, we're seeing a lot of great work going on from the locals, you know, so it's good stuff.
Thank you so much for your time. I can't thank you both enough. So thanks, everybody. I'll be in touch. See you soon.
Adios.
Thank you.
Bye.